When a little girl in a wheelchair asked to meet the most dangerous dog in the shelter, the staff held their breath, expecting disaster. But what happened next would melt millions of hearts and turn pain into something no one could have imagined. This isn't just a story about survival. It's about a connection that defied every rule. Don't miss what happens near the end, and if this story moves, you hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. At Maplewood Animal Shelter, the echo of barking dogs filled the hall like restless ghosts. The place smelled of bleach and wet fur, the kind of scent that clung to the skin, even after you left. 11-year-old Lena Brooks, a black girl with kind, watchful eyes and cocoa-colored skin, rolled her wheelchair down the concrete aisle as her mother Denise followed closely behind. Lena's small hands gripped the rims of her wheels, her movement steady but deliberate. Every cage she passed had a story. Tails wagging paws pressed to bars, pleading eyes begging for a home. But Lena's gaze wasn't drawn to the friendly ones. It stopped at the very end of the row where the light dimmed and fear seemed to settle. There inside a rust-stained cage sat a large German shepherd with a thick scar across his muzzle. His fur was patchy, his chest heavy with slow, uneven breaths. The sign on his kennel was scrawled in red marker, "Rocco, do not approach." His eyes, a deep golden brown, watched everything but trusted nothing. Denise's voice trembled as she spoke. "Baby, let's look at the others. That one, he's not safe." A volunteer named Chris, wearing a blue shelter vest, stepped forward and nodded grimly. "Your mom's right. He's different. He doesn't like people much." But Lena didn't move. Her voice came out soft but sure, carrying a calm that silenced the air around her. "Why is everyone afraid of him?" Chris shifted uncomfortably. "He's bitten handlers. He's unpredictable. We're making some decisions soon about what's best for him." Lena blinked, reading between the lines. "You mean you're putting him down?" Chris hesitated, caught off guard. "Sweetheart, it's complicated." "No, it's not," Lena said, her tone small but firm. "You think he's too broken to be fixed." Rocco lifted his head at the sound of her voice. His body tensed. He didn't growl, not yet, but the muscles under his fur rippled like a warning. The other dogs had learned to stay quiet when he stirred. Denise knelt beside her daughter's wheelchair, eyes full of worry. "Lena, baby, please, let's just move on," Mama, she whispered, eyes locked on Rocco's. "I want to see him." "No, sweetheart, that dog's dangerous." "He's not dangerous," Lena said softly. "He's just tired of people giving up on him." The staff exchanged uneasy glances. No one expected words like that from an 11-year-old. Chris sighed. "Even if we let you near him, he wouldn't let you close." "Maybe he just needs someone who won't walk away," she said. Her mother winced at the word walk. It slipped out naturally, but both of them felt it. Lena's legs had not moved since the night of the accident. The night headlights spun, glass shattered, and her laughter vanished under the weight of twisted metal. She rolled forward slowly, her eyes never leaving Rocco's. The German shepherd's ears perked. He stood now tail low, body rigid. The metal bars rattled as he shifted his weight. His lips curled slightly, exposing his teeth. The sound was low and warning, like thunder rumbling from far away. Chris stepped between them instinctively. "That's close enough. Don't," Lena whispered. "Don't stand between us." "Us," Denise repeated, her voice trembling. "Lena, what do you mean us? He's not your dog." "Maybe he could be," Lena said, her tone distant, almost like she was talking to herself. "If no one wants him, then he's already like me." Denise froze. For months, she had tried to fill her daughter's world with color again. Therapy sessions, hospital visits, cheerful books, but nothing had sparked light in her eyes. Yet here, in front of a scarred, angry dog, that light flickered. Rocco lowered his head, the growl still there, but softer now, confused. He didn't understand this child, who wasn't afraid. The others always flinched. They yelled, they rushed, they turned their backs. This one didn't. She just stayed. "Hey," Rocco, Lena whispered, reading the name tag. "You've got a strong name." He blinked, slow and uncertain. Her voice was quiet, steady, not full of fear like the others. It stirred something small and buried inside him, a distant memory of a human voice that once sounded kind. Chris rubbed the back of his neck. "You're a brave kid, I'll give you that, but he's not for adoption. He's scheduled to leave us tonight." Denise's breath caught. "But we've tried everything," Chris said softly. "He's been here too long. No one wants him." Lena's hand gripped her wheel tight. "Then I came just in time." Denise whispered, "Baby, you can't." But her daughter wasn't listening. She rolled a few inches closer, stopping when the front of her chair was just outside the cage. Rocco's growl vibrated the air. Denise's heart pounded so loud she could hear it echo in her ears. Lena's voice was barely audible. "It's okay. You don't have to be good. You just have to breathe." For a second, Rocco's growl stopped. The silence was heavier than the noise. The other dogs whimpered softly, sensing something they couldn't name. Chris swallowed hard. "All right, that's enough. Let's go before wait," Lena said quickly. "He's listening." And he was. Rocco stood there, chest-heaving eyes fixed on the girl who didn't run. She didn't shout. She didn't even move, just watched him like she could see past the scars. The overhead lights flickered once, then steadied. The wind outside howled, rattling the shelter's windows. Rocco took one hesitant step forward, then stopped, lowering his head slightly, unsure. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky still hung heavy and gray. Lena woke up before dawn, her mother still asleep, the soft rhythm of rainwater dripping from the roof echoing through their small apartment. She couldn't stop thinking about the dog from the shelter, the way he had looked at her through the bars, not with rage, but with something close to confusion, like he couldn't decide whether to hate or hope. Rocco. The name stayed in her head like a heartbeat. She had promised him she'd come back, and even though it had only been one night, that promise felt heavier than anything she'd ever said. At breakfast, Denise tried to change the subject, talking about school therapy, anything but the dog. "Baby, there are other ones," she said softly, setting a bowl of oatmeal in front of her. "Ones that need love, too." But Lena shook her head. "He needs it the most." Denise sighed, rubbing her forehead. "That dog's not safe, Lena. You heard them. They said he's too far gone." "That's what people said about me," Lena murmured. Her mother froze, spoon halfway to her lips, and for a moment, neither spoke. After the accident, doctors had told Denise her daughter might never walk again. She had smiled politely and thanked them, but she remembered the way the nurse had whispered in the hallway, "That poor girl. She'll never be the same." Now, Lena's words carried that memory like a mirror turned back toward her. Denise looked down at her daughter and realized something that scared her more than Rocco ever could. This wasn't just about a dog. It was about both of them learning to live again. When they arrived at Maplewood later that morning, the shelter was quieter than before. Volunteers were mopping the floors, and the air smelled faintly of bleach and wet fur. Chris spotted them and frowned, though there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "You came back. I told him I would," Lena said. "You can't make promises to these dogs, sweetheart," he said softly. "Sometimes keeping them hurts worse." She looked at him seriously. "That's not true. Being forgotten hurts worse." Chris didn't know what to say. He handed them visitor badges and motioned toward the kennels. "He's still here, but he didn't take last night well." They followed him down the row, the sound of claws scraping concrete echoing faintly. When they reached the last cage, Rocco was pacing again, his movement sharp, erratic. The red tag on his kennel had been replaced with a yellow one, temporary reprieve. Chris explained quietly. "The manager saw you yesterday. She postponed, said maybe we'll try one more evaluation." Denise swallowed, a mix of relief and dread swirling in her chest. Lena rolled forward, stopping in front of Rocco's cage. "Hey, soldier," she said softly. His head snapped up at the sound of her voice. He froze one paw, still mid-step, eyes narrowing. Then something shifted. The growl that had started in his throat broke off halfway. His ears tilted slightly forward. "You remember me?" she whispered. Rocco didn't move closer, but his breathing slowed. He stood tall, his gaze flicking between Lena and the staff. There was intelligence in those eyes, but also pain, a kind of bone-deep exhaustion that no one had bothered to heal. Lena leaned forward, studying the jagged scar across his shoulder. "What happened to him?" she asked. Chris hesitated. He was a police trainee. Back when he was younger, they said he showed promise. Strong, obedient, loyal. But then, on a raid 2 years ago, things went wrong. Gunfire. Rocco was hit. His handler was hurt too, and after that, Chris trailed off. They said he changed, wouldn't respond to commands anymore, wouldn't trust anyone. They retired him early, sent him to a rescue. He bounced between 3 shelters before ending up here. Lena frowned. "So he's not mean, he's just hurt." "He's dangerous when he's in pain," Chris corrected gently. The vets found something on his x-ray, a small piece of metal still near his spine. They said surgery might kill him, so they left it. Sometimes it moves, sometimes it doesn't. Lena's chest tightened. "So when he growls, it's because he hurts," maybe Chris admitted. Or maybe he's just scared of being hurt again. Rocco had started pacing less, now his attention caught by the sound of Lena's voice. Her tone wasn't sharp or cautious like the others. It was warm, low, steady. He tilted his head slightly, ears twitching at the word soldier. It was the same name his old handler used to call him back before everything changed. Somewhere buried under fear and pain, the word still meant something. Lena pressed a hand against the bars. Denise gasped quietly, but didn't pull her away. "You're still a good boy," Lena whispered, "even if nobody told you that in a long time." Rocco's tail gave the faintest twitch, a subtle motion so small most would miss it. But Lena saw it. She smiled softly. "See, Mama, he remembers?" Denise exhaled, torn between awe and worry. He's calmer with you," Chris nodded slowly. "It's strange. He doesn't let anyone get that close without losing it. Maybe because I'm sitting," Lena said. "He doesn't feel small." That struck Chris silent. He looked at the girl in the wheelchair and realized she was right. The dog who towered over grown men now stood eye level with a child who couldn't run. They were equals in a world that looked down on both of them. Rocco stepped closer. His nose brushed the cold steel, and he sniffed softly, uncertain but curious. Lena smiled wider. "Hey, there you are." Denise, though exhausted and worried, agreed reluctantly. "This is the last visit, Lena," she said as she helped her daughter into the car. "We're not taking that dog home." Lena didn't argue. She didn't have to. Sometimes she knew her mother's no just meant not yet. The shelter looked quieter that morning. The sun had come out, streaking the gray sky with gold. A thin mist clung to the glass doors, and for once the air didn't smell only of bleach. It smelled alive, hopeful. Chris was already there, filling water bowls. When he saw Lena, he smiled, shaking his head slightly. "You're becoming a regular," he said. "Rocco's going to start expecting you." "Good," she replied. "I don't like breaking promises." He opened the main gate for her and followed as her wheelchair rolled softly down the corridor. The wheels squeaked against the floor, echoing faintly. Rocco's ears perked before they even reached him. The sound stirred something buried deep inside him. A flash of blue lights, the screech of sirens, the sharp pain of gunfire, and then the silence that followed. His body stiffened instantly. When Lena turned the corner, his growl thundered through the hallway. Chris swore under his breath. "He's having a bad one," he muttered, stepping forward to block Lena, but she held up her hand. "Don't. Let me try. Lena, please." Her mother, standing a few feet behind, folded her arms tightly across her chest, trying to trust what she didn't understand. The growling grew louder, but Lena's voice, calm and clear, rose above it. "Hey, Rocco," she called. "It's me, the girl who talks too much." For a split second, the growl faltered. He stood rigid, tail low, teeth bared, but eyes uncertain. "That's right," she continued. "You remember me. I said I'd come back." Rocco took one step forward, then another, nostrils flaring as if to confirm her scent. The wheels on Lena's chair moved again, and immediately his ears flattened. He barked sharply, backing into the corner of the cage. Chris cursed and reached for the catch pole. "He's triggered by the sound," he said quickly. "It's setting him off," but Lena shook her head. "No, he's scared." She rolled her chair a few inches forward and then stopped. The wheels squeaked again, a soft, rhythmic noise. Rocco's chest heaved. His tail twitched nervously. "You hear that sound?" she said softly. "It's not a siren, it's just me." Her voice was gentle, almost musical. She began humming quietly, the same tune her father used to hum before bedtime when storms frightened her. The melody floated through the hall, slow, steady, safe. Rocco's breathing eased. He watched the wheels spin, his growl fading into a confused whimper. The memories of flashing lights began to dissolve, replaced by this strange girl's calm rhythm. Chris lowered the pole slowly. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered. "He's listening." Lena smiled faintly, because no one's talked to him like he understands English before. "Maybe no one believed he did," Chris said quietly. Denise's hand covered her mouth as she watched her daughter lean closer, her tone steady, her small body unafraid. "Hey, soldier," Lena said again. "It's just me. You can stop guarding the door now." Her words carried something weighty, something that slipped under Rocco's defenses. He stopped trembling and slowly sat down, his tail curling around his paws. His amber eyes tracked the slow spin of her wheels as if trying to decode them. Then, with a low, uncertain whine, he rested his head between his front paws. The tension in the air shattered. The volunteers in the back froze in disbelief. "He sat," Chris said in a whisper. "He never sits when someone's near him." Lena's smile grew small and wet with tears. "See, Mama, he's trying." Denise knelt beside her daughter, unable to hide her awe. "I don't understand how he's so calm with you," she said softly. "Because I don't move fast," Lena replied. "People move too fast around him. They forget he's scared." That struck something in everyone standing there. For months, the shelter had treated Rocco like a danger to control, not a creature to heal. But this child, this quiet black girl in a wheelchair, had somehow reached what no adult could touch. Chris spoke again, voice unsteady. "You've got a gift, kid. I've never seen anything like it." Lena shook her head. "It's not a gift. It's just patience." She extended her hand again, slow and steady, but didn't push forward. "Only if you want to, Rocco," she said softly. Rocco blinked and shifted his weight. He didn't come closer, but he didn't retreat either. His breathing was calmer now, his shoulders no longer rigid. A single droplet of saliva hit the concrete as he yawned. Not aggression, just exhaustion. "He's tired," Lena murmured. "He hasn't slept right in a long time." Chris nodded slowly. "That's true. He paces all night, every night. We thought it was nerves. It's memories," Lena said simply. "He remembers when everything went wrong." Rocco tilted his head slightly as if he understood. His ears twitched at her words, and for a moment, the barrier between them didn't feel like steel. It felt like something invisible that could be broken by kindness. When it was time to go, Lena didn't want to leave, and neither did Rocco. He followed her with his eyes as her wheelchair turned toward the exit, giving a soft, uncertain bark. It was the first sound he'd made that didn't carry anger. Denise smiled weakly. "That dog's gonna break your heart, baby. Maybe he's gonna fix it," Lena whispered. They left the shelter just as the sun began to climb, painting the parking lot in gold. Behind the steel bars, Rocco lay down where she'd been pressing his head against the cool floor. For the first time since the night he was shot, he didn't dream of sirens. He dreamed of the soft hum of wheels and the voice that told him it was okay to stop running. That evening, when the staff locked up, Chris lingered at Rocco's cage. They smiled when they saw her wheelchair glide through the entrance, the soft hum of its wheels echoing down the kennel corridor like the rhythm of hope. Chris met them halfway with a clipboard in hand, pretending to look annoyed, but failing to hide his grin. "You're early again," he said. "You know most people don't visit the same dog 3 days in a row." Lena shrugged, eyes bright. "Most people gave up on him. I'm not most people." Denise smiled weakly and followed, holding a paper bag filled with treats she'd baked that morning. The staff had told her it was better to keep visits short, but every time they left, Lena's face came alive in a way Denise hadn't seen since the accident. It wasn't just about the dog anymore. It was about watching her daughter breathe again. The shelter was quieter today. The morning sun spilled through the narrow windows, painting stripes of light across the floor. Rocco was lying near the front of his cage, his chin resting on his paws. When he saw Lena, his head lifted instantly. His tail gave one cautious thump against the concrete, like a forgotten heartbeat trying to return. "Hey, soldier," Lena said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Chris's eyes flicked toward her, startled. "What did you just call him?" "Soldier," she repeated, smiling. "That's his name now." Chris's voice dropped. "That's what his handler used to call him, his last one." The police report said that was the word that made him respond in training. Lena turned to him slowly. "So he remembers." Chris nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, somewhere in there, he still does." Rocco's ears twitched, his eyes following every sound she made. His body stayed low, but the tension in his shoulders was gone. Lena rolled her chair closer until she was only a few feet away. The volunteers watched nervously, but none of them dared interrupt. "I know what it's like," she whispered. "To lose something you didn't ask to lose. To wake up one day and not recognize yourself anymore." Rocco's gaze locked on her face. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to understand the words. "You were brave once," Lena continued, "and then somebody hurt you, and now you don't know who to trust. I get that." Her voice cracked slightly, and Denise's hand gripped the railing beside her. The air in the room grew thick, filled with the sound of Lena's words and Rocco's slow, uneven breathing. "When I got hurt," Lena said, "everyone talked about how strong I was, but they didn't see the nights I cried because I hated the sound of the wheelchair. I hated that people looked at me different, like I was fragile glass." Rocco shifted his weight, the metal tag on his collar clinking softly. "I stopped wanting people to look at me at all," she whispered. "That's how I think you feel too." Rocco blinked once, twice, then lowered his head onto his paws. Again, his ears flattened but relaxed. The growl that had hovered in his chest since the day he arrived was gone. "You don't have to be scared of me," Lena said. "I know how to be quiet." She set the bag of treats on her lap and pulled one out slowly. Denise opened her mouth to protest, but Chris shook his head. "Let her," he whispered. "He's watching her, not us." Lena broke the treat into 2 pieces and slid one gently across the concrete floor toward the bars. "You can have it if you want," she said softly. "I won't touch you. I'll just stay here." Rocco's nose twitched. He hesitated for a long moment, then crawled forward slowly, belly low to the ground. The movement was stiff, cautious. His front paw landed near the treat, and he froze again. Lena didn't move a muscle. "It's okay," she murmured. "It's yours." He sniffed it once, then once more, before snapping it up quickly and retreating to his corner. The crunch echoed through the room. Lena grinned. "Good boy." The words hit something deep inside Rocco. He hadn't heard that phrase since before the pain, before the gunfire, before his world went silent. For a moment, his breathing quickened, unsure whether to trust the warmth it brought back. He looked up again, and she was still there, smiling at him with tears glimmering in her eyes. "You're still a good boy," she said again, quieter this time, like a secret meant just for him. Rocco didn't know why, but he believed her. His body trembled, and he pressed himself tighter into the corner tail curled around his leg. The last time someone had called him good, it had been followed by shouting pain, the burn of betrayal. But this time, no harm came. Only stillness. Only her. Lena's hand hovered in the air for a second before she let it rest on the cold steel bars. "You can come closer if you want," she whispered. "I won't move fast. I promise." Denise's breath caught. Chris's hands clenched the clipboard. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. Then Rocco pushed himself up slowly, his nails scraping softly against the floor. He took one hesitant step forward, then another, until he stood just close enough that she could feel his breath through the bars. Lena kept perfectly still. "Hey, soldier," she whispered. "You made it this far." He leaned in and sniffed her hand nostrils flaring. His ears flicked forward and his tail twitched once more. The muscles in his shoulders loosened. Lena smiled through her tears. "That's it. You're okay." Then without warning, he did something no one had ever seen him do. He sighed. A long, heavy breath that came from deep inside, the kind that carries years of weight. When he exhaled, it sounded like letting go. Lena's own breath broke. "See, Mama," she whispered. "He remembers what peace feels like." Denise wiped at her eyes, unable to speak. Chris whispered, He let her in." The room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Even the other dogs seemed to sense it. The barking had stopped, replaced by a soft, steady calm. Lena withdrew her hands slowly, careful not to break the moment. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said softly. There was no arguing with that. Denise didn't fully understand the bond forming between her daughter and that broken animal, but she could see that every visit brought a spark back into Lena's eyes, a small piece of the girl she thought she had lost the night of the accident. They arrived just after 8, and Chris met them at the front with a small smile that hinted at disbelief. "He's different since you came," he said. "He's eating better. He hasn't snapped at anyone. I don't know what you're doing, but it's working." Lena smiled softly. "I'm not doing anything," she said. "I'm just talking to him like someone who's tired of hurting." Chris chuckled under his breath. "Well, it's more than most of us have managed." They walked down the hall, and Rocco's cage came into view. The big shepherd stood already waiting at the gate, not pacing like before, but alert tail twitching lightly. When he saw her, his ears perked and his body stiffened in anticipation. He recognized the sound of her wheels now not as a threat, but as something familiar. She stopped a few feet away and smiled. "Hey, soldier," she whispered. "I told you I'd come back." He let out a short, uncertain whine. The air between them was quiet except for the faint hum of the lights. She took the bag of treats from her lap and held one out. "You can take it if you want," she said softly. "I'll wait." Her voice was steady, her movement slow and deliberate. The dog's golden eyes flickered with hesitation, but his nose caught the scent, and curiosity began to outweigh fear. Step by step, he crept closer. The volunteers who had gathered near the end of the corridor froze in silence. Even Denise, who had tried to remain composed, felt her breath catch in her chest. Lena didn't blink, she didn't flinch, she simply waited, holding her hand steady through the bars. The world seemed to slow down as Rocco took one last step forward, his nose brushing the edge of her palm. The contact was brief, a soft, trembling touch, but it shattered something inside him. He didn't growl, he didn't snap. He trembled instead, as though realizing that trust was harder than pain. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe." Rocco's tail flicked once, uncertain, then again slower this time. He pressed his muzzle gently into her hand, inhaling her scent, feeling the warmth that had been missing from his world for too long. For a moment, everything else disappeared: the cage, the scars, the years of loneliness. There was only her hand and the calm heartbeat she carried in her voice. "That's it," she said, her voice breaking. "Good boy." Denise's vision blurred as she reached for the wall to steady herself. Chris exhaled a shaky breath. He touched her. He whispered as though afraid that saying it too loud might break the spell. He actually did it. Lena stroked the bridge of Rocco's muzzle with gentle fingers, careful not to move too quickly. His fur was rough and uneven, and beneath it she could feel the hard ridge of an old wound. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she said softly. The dog blinked slowly, eyes heavy with understanding. "Me too," she continued. "Mine's here." She pointed to the long scar that ran along her arm just below her elbow, a mark from shattered glass. "We match you and me." Rocco tilted his head, his gaze following her finger. For a brief second, he leaned forward and pressed his nose against that scar. It was almost instinctive, as if he knew what it meant. The touch sent a shiver through Lena's arm, and she let out a soft sob that she quickly tried to stifle. "See, Mama," she said through tears. "He's not mean. He's just sad." Denise wiped at her face, nodding silently. Rocco's breathing slowed. He lowered his head onto his paws, letting out a low sigh that vibrated through the floor. Lena smiled through her tears. "You did good, soldier. Real good." When she finally pulled her hand away, Rocco made a soft whine, his eyes following her movement. It wasn't the sound of fear or aggression anymore, it was longing. She reached into the bag and tossed him another treat, which he caught mid-air with surprising grace. The volunteers clapped softly, unable to help themselves. Chris's eyes glistened as he crouched beside the cage. "I think he just chose his person," he whispered. Lena turned toward him, her face glowing with quiet pride. "No," she said gently. "We chose each other." The rest of the day at the shelter felt different. Even the dogs that usually barked endlessly seemed calmer. Hope, fragile and new, hung in the air like a scent everyone could feel, but no one could name. When it was time to leave, Lena lingered at the cage, resting her fingers once more against the bars. "I'll come back tomorrow," she promised. "Don't forget me." Rocco didn't move, but his eyes followed her until she disappeared through the doorway. That night, Denise tucked her daughter into bed and noticed something she hadn't seen in months. Lena was smiling in her sleep. Across town, Rocco lay on his side, his paws twitching in dreams. For the first time since his injury, he wasn't running from something. He was running towards someone. When the night guard passed his cage, he found the big shepherd curled up tightly, tail wrapped around his legs, sleeping soundly. She dreamed of Rocco again, dreamed of his eyes, the deep amber kind that seemed to see straight through everything, even the parts of her that hurt too much to speak of. She had felt his muzzle against her palm, the soft tremor that wasn't aggression, but fear melting away into something fragile, something alive. She couldn't let that be the last time. When Denise came into her room to help her dress, Lena was already awake and dressed, sitting upright in her chair, her coat zipped. "You're not going to stop, are you?" her mother asked, voice half resigned, half admiring. "Not until he's safe," Lena replied, adjusting her gloves. "He trusts me now. That has to mean something." Denise sighed deeply, grabbing her purse. "All right, baby, but this has to be the last one this week. You've got therapy tomorrow." "Okay," Lena said, though they both knew it wasn't true. The drive to Maplewood was quiet. Outside, the winter wind pressed against the car windows, the kind that carried the smell of snow and wet pavement. Denise hummed softly to keep from thinking too much, but Lena just watched the trees blur by her mind fixed on the shelter's long hallways and the cage at the end of the row. When they arrived, something felt off. The lobby lights were dimmer, the volunteers quieter. Even Chris looked uneasy as he greeted them. "Morning, you two," he said, forcing a smile. You came just in time." Just in time for what Denise asked, instantly tense. Chris hesitated, scratching his neck. "The manager, she's been talking about finalizing Rocco's paperwork." Lena's chest tightened. "What paperwork?" He said softly. "The final release. They have to make space for new intakes. We're overcrowded again." The words hit Lena like a slap. "But you said they postponed it." "They did," Chris said quickly, "but that was temporary. I don't make the calls, kiddo." Lena didn't wait for permission. She rolled down the hallway faster than her mother could follow, her small hands gripping the wheels so tightly her knuckles went white. Her heart pounded with the rhythm of the wheels spinning. When she reached the end of the corridor, she saw him, Rocco, already sitting near the bars, tail-low eyes lighting up the moment they met hers. He stood immediately, his ears perking, the faint sound of his claws tapping the concrete floor. "Hey, soldier," she said, breathless. "I missed you." His tail wagged, once cautious, but real. Behind her, Denise and Chris caught up, and not far behind them came the shelter manager, holding a clipboard and a manila folder. The look on her face said everything. "Sweetheart," the woman began, her voice heavy, "you shouldn't be back here right now." Lena ignored her. She wheeled closer to the cage, her heart thundering. "You're going to kill him today," she said flatly. The woman's expression tightened. "It's not like that. We have policies. He's been here almost a year. We've tried everything." "No, you haven't," Lena interrupted sharply. "You haven't tried love." The manager looked down, her grip tightening on the folder. "You don't understand, honey. This dog's history, he's not safe." "He is with me," Lena's voice cracked. The sound echoed down the hallway, silencing every other noise. Even the barking in the other kennels stopped for a moment. Denise's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Chris stood frozen. The manager exhaled. "Sweetheart, I know you mean well, but it's not your decision." "Then whose is it?" Lena demanded. "The people who gave up on him before even trying. The ones who called him dangerous because they didn't have the patience to see past the scars. That's not fair." Rocco whimpered softly, his nose pressing against the bars as if sensing her distress. Lena reached forward and touched his face, her fingers sliding gently down the side of his muzzle. "It's okay," she whispered. "They don't know you like I do." Her hands slipped through the bars farther this time, and before anyone could stop her, Rocco leaned in, pressing his forehead against her fingers. The contact was steady, deliberate, filled with a silent understanding. "See," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He's not a monster." The manager swallowed hard, trying to hold her professional tone, but her voice wavered. "It's not about that, sweetheart. We just can't risk you're risking his soul," Lena whispered, her voice trembling but fierce. "And maybe mine too." Then she did something that made everyone freeze. She reached her arms through the bars and wrapped them around Rocco's neck, pulling him close, her small frame pressed against the cold steel, her cheek against his fur. He didn't move. He didn't growl. He simply leaned into her, his breathing syncing with hers until they were almost one sound. The volunteers who had gathered at the end of the hall stood in stunned silence. Chris's hands shook as he lifted his phone, hitting record instinctively. He didn't know why, maybe to prove it wasn't a dream. The shelter lights flickered above them. Rocco let out a long sigh, the kind that came from deep inside a broken chest, and nuzzled closer to her arm. "You're not going anywhere," Lena whispered fiercely. "Do you hear me, soldier? You're not leaving me." Denise stepped forward, voice cracking. "Baby, please come back. You'll get hurt." But Rocco didn't move, and neither did Lena. "He needs me, Mama," she said softly. "And I think I need him too." Chris lowered his phone. Now he's wet. "You just saved him," he murmured. The manager stood still for a long moment, then turned away, hiding her face behind the folder. "All right," she said, finally, voice breaking. "All right, we'll hold off." The tension snapped like glass. Denise collapsed to her knees, covering her face with her hands. Chris exhaled shakily, lowering his camera. Lena smiled through tears, still clutching Rocco. "You hear that, soldier?" she whispered. "You're staying." Rocco looked up at her eyes, soft, then licked the back of her hand through the bars. For him, it wasn't about understanding words. It was about understanding what love felt like when it didn't hurt. That evening, Chris posted the video. Reporters showed up at the gate. Strangers left flowers, toys, and handwritten notes that read things like, "You saved him," and the world needed to see this. But through all the noise, all the flashing lights and social media praise, Lena stayed quiet. When the principal at her school mentioned it, she shrugged. When her classmates whispered, she just smiled. To her, it wasn't about the internet. It was about Rocco, the dog who had looked at her like she was the first person who ever saw him for who he really was. He didn't need fame or attention. He needed peace. That morning, as Denise helped her daughter into the car, she tried again to convince her to let it go. "Baby, maybe someone else can take him," she said softly. "Someone with a big house, a yard, someone who can handle a dog like that." Lena fastened her seatbelt with quiet determination. "He doesn't need a big house, Mama. He needs someone who knows what it's like to be hurt and still keep going." Denise sighed, watching her little girl stare out the window as the car pulled away from their apartment. She couldn't understand how a child could hold so much conviction in such a fragile body, but she recognized that look. It was the same one her husband used to have when he decided something couldn't be undone. When they arrived at the shelter, the parking lot was full of news vans. Reporters huddled by the entrance, microphones in hand. As soon as the car door opened, cameras flashed. Someone shouted, "That's her!" The girl from the video. Lena flinched at the noise, and Denise quickly moved to shield her. "We're not here for pictures," she said sharply. Chris appeared at the door, his face weary but relieved. "They won't stop coming," he said quietly as they entered. "We've had over 200 calls about him. Donations, offers, rescues, you name it. Everyone wants him now." Lena didn't smile. "They want the story she said, not the dog." Chris looked at her, startled by the maturity in her tone. "You're probably right," he admitted. "But that video saved his life. He's off the euthanasia list for good." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them quickly. "Can I see him?" "You know the way," he said softly. She rolled down the hall, the familiar sound of her wheels echoing against the floor. When she turned the corner, Rocco was waiting. He stood tall behind the bars, tail-stiff ears perked forward, eyes fixed on the sound approaching from the hallway. The moment her chair came into view, he froze for half a second, and then something incredible happened. His tail wagged, not once, not twice, but steady and strong the way dogs do when they recognize their person. Chris gasped quietly. "That's the first time he's done that," he whispered. Lena smiled through tears. "Hey, soldier," she said softly. The wagging grew faster, his whole body trembling with anticipation. "You remember me?" she said. He let out a soft bark, short, almost cautious, but filled with joy. Denise pressed her hands to her mouth, watching as her daughter rolled closer. "I told you," Lena said to her mother, voice breaking. "He knows me." The door of the cage opened slowly as Chris unlatched the lock. "You earned this," he said. "Just be gentle." "Okay." Lena nodded. The gate swung open, and for the first time, there was no barrier between them. Rocco stepped forward carefully, his nails clicking against the floor, his body tense but not defensive. Lena extended her hand, palm up. He sniffed it once, then pressed his muzzle against her palm. She laughed, a sound so pure that it made Denise's eyes fill instantly. "You're okay now," Lena whispered. "You're home even if we're not there yet." The dog rested his massive head on her lap, his weight pressing gently against her legs. He sighed a deep, heavy sound that seemed to empty years of sorrow out of his chest. Lena stroked his head slowly, her fingers tracing the scars on his neck. "No more cages," she murmured. "No more bad dreams." The volunteers who had gathered at the door wiped at their faces. Chris knelt beside them, speaking softly to Rocco. "You found your person, huh, boy?" The shepherd's eyes flicked toward him briefly before turning back to Lena. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just leaned closer into her. "That's right," Chris said. "She's yours." Denise knelt beside them, reaching out to touch Rocco's back. His muscles tensed briefly, but he didn't pull away. "He's warm," she whispered. Lena smiled through her tears. "Told you he's not scary." Rocco lifted his head slightly and licked the back of her hand. It was clumsy, awkward, but full of trust. "You see that," Chris said quietly. "That's loyalty." He hasn't forgotten what that means. Later that afternoon, when the reporters were finally turned away and the shelter quieted down again, Lena and Rocco sat together for almost an hour. No one spoke. The world outside was loud with attention, but here in this small patch of silence, everything was simple. A girl who couldn't walk and a dog who wouldn't trust had found each other. When it was time to leave, Rocco followed her to the door of his kennel without hesitation. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promised, "and the day after that. I'm not done yet." Chris leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his voice rough with emotion. "You know, the weirdest thing is, he doesn't just look calmer, he looks proud." "Because he is," Lena said softly. "He's a soldier again." That night after the shelter closed, Rocco didn't return to his corner. He lay by the gate instead, staring at the hallway where Lena had left. When the wind howled through the vents, he didn't shiver. He just waited patient, and still knowing she would come back. Across town, Lena lay awake in bed, scrolling through messages she didn't care to answer. Everyone wanted to interview her, to make her a symbol of kindness, but she didn't want fame. Every visit, he greeted her with a wag of his tail and a soft bark that made the staff shake their heads in disbelief. The once feared German shepherd now rested his head on her lap, as if that was where it had always belonged. Lena brought him a red collar that morning, embroidered with gold thread, spelling Rocco. "It's your real name now," she said, fastening it around his neck. "Not a warning label." He blinked his amber eyes, reflecting the fluorescent light, and leaned into her hand. Chris, standing nearby, grinned. "You two are something else," he said. "That dog wouldn't let me within 10 feet of him a month ago. Now look at him. He was just waiting," Lena said softly. "Everyone needs someone who won't give up." Denise smiled faintly, though her eyes were wary. She had finally agreed to let Rocco come home, but she couldn't help worrying. "He's big baby," she whispered later in the car. "Stronger than you." Lena turned to her mother with calm certainty. "So are you, but you never hurt me." That night the storm rolled in. It started with a low rumble of thunder, the kind that made the shelter's dogs bark in chorus. By midnight, rain hammered the roof and wind rattled the old windows. The power flickered, and for a few seconds everything went black. Chris had just finished securing the last of the kennels when a loud crack split the air, something metal, something heavy. He ran toward the back hall flashlight beam bouncing across the walls and found Rocco's cage door hanging open, the latch broken clean off. "No, no, no," he whispered, heart racing. "Not tonight." The emergency lights flickered weakly, painting the hallway red. Several other dogs barked in panic, but Rocco was gone. His leash lay coiled on the floor like a question with no answer. Chris grabbed his jacket and ran outside into the storm, shouting Rocco's name. Rain lashed against his face and thunder drowned his voice. The night swallowed everything. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the sky gray and bruised. Mud covered the parking lot, and the chain-link fence at the back of the property was bent outward, where something large had forced its way through. The shelter staff gathered in silence as Chris dropped his soaked flashlight onto the counter. "He's gone," he said. I checked everywhere. Denise arrived minutes later, carrying Lena in her arms because the flooded sidewalks were too dangerous for her wheelchair. The moment Lena saw the broken fence, her breath caught. "He wouldn't just leave," she said. "He hates storms." "Honey," Denise said gently. "Maybe he panicked." "No," Lena insisted, her voice trembling. "He wouldn't run from me. He'd run to me." Chris opened his mouth to argue, but then something strange happened. A shout came from outside one of the volunteers near the entrance. "Chris, you need to see this." They rushed to the front door, and there, sitting in the cold morning light, was Rocco. His fur was soaked, his paws caked with mud, and his eyes were wide but calm. In his mouth, he held something small and blue, a hospital bracelet. The one Lena had lost months ago, the one she'd worn since her accident. Denise covered her mouth with a gasp. Lena rolled forward, tears already streaking her face. "You found it," she whispered. "You found me." Rocco dropped the bracelet gently into her lap and nudged it with his nose. His body shook from exhaustion, but his tail wagged once slow and certain. Chris crouched beside him, voice breaking. He could have gone anywhere, he said. There's a whole forest behind that fence, miles of road, but he came back. Lena leaned forward and pressed her forehead against Rocco's wet fur. "You came home," she whispered. "You always find your way back." The volunteers stood around them silent, except for the sound of quiet sobs. Denise knelt beside her daughter, running a hand through the dog's soaked fur. "I guess we don't need to wait for the inspection," she said softly. "He's already family." Later that day, as the sun broke through the clouds, Rocco lay wrapped in a blanket on the shelter floor, his head resting on Lena's lap. Chris brought hot coffee for the adults and a cup of cocoa for Lena. "You know," he said, smiling weakly, "we checked his old microchip records last night. The police trainer who raised him lived 15 miles from here. He could have gone that way, but he didn't. He came back to the person he trusted." Lena stroked Rocco's ear gently. "That's what soldiers do," she said. "They come home." Chris chuckled, his eyes glassy. "You really were meant for each other." Denise leaned against the doorframe, watching her daughter trace circles in Rocco's fur. For the first time in months, she saw something she had thought she'd lost forever: peace. The shelter manager entered quietly, her tone softer than Lena had ever heard. "We finished the paperwork," she said. "He's officially yours now." Lena looked up, eyes wide. "Really?" the woman nodded. "No more cages, no more deadlines." Lena's tears fell freely, then splashing onto Rocco's fur. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for giving him a chance." The manager smiled gently. "I think you're the one who did that." That evening, as they prepared to leave, the staff gathered to watch. Rocco stood beside Lena's wheelchair wearing his new red collar. His posture was proud, his gait uneven, but steady. When Denise opened the car door, he jumped in carefully, settling on the floor beside Lena. "You ready to go home, soldier?" she whispered. Rocco's tail thumped once against the seat, and she smiled through her tears. As they drove away, Chris stood in the parking lot watching the car disappear down the road. "He came back," he said softly to himself. They both did. That night in their small apartment, Rocco slept at the foot of Lena's bed. The room was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of their breathing. The first morning at home felt strange quiet, in a way that didn't feel empty, but peaceful. Rocco slept curled up beside Lena's wheelchair, his nose twitching every time she moved. When the alarm clock buzzed, his ears perked, and he stood immediately, tail wagging. Denise watched from the kitchen doorway, holding a mug of coffee, still half disbelieving that this was real. For months, she had woken to the silence of a house filled with grief, but now there was life again. Footsteps, laughter, a bark, echoing through the small apartment. Lena giggled as Rocco tried to hand her his leash, carrying it in his mouth like a proud child. "You want to go already?" she laughed. "We just woke up." He wagged harder, the sound of his tail thumping against the wall like a drumbeat. Denise smiled and handed her daughter the leash. "You two go ahead, I'll grab my coat." The morning air was crisp, and sunlight poured through the streets in golden ribbons. Lena rolled her wheelchair down the cracked sidewalk with Rocco trotting beside her, his red collar shining bright against his dark fur. He didn't pull, didn't run ahead. He matched her exactly, step for step, wheel for paw. Neighbors peeked out from porches and windows, watching the unlikely pair move together as though they had been doing it forever. An older man sweeping his driveway called out, "That's a fine-looking soldier you've got there." Lena grinned. "That's his name." The man chuckled, tipping his hat. "Good name for a good boy." Rocco barked once, and the sound made everyone smile. They made it to the park, where the pavement gave way to soft grass. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh rain. Lena parked her wheelchair near a patch of wildflowers and unhooked Rocco's leash. He hesitated for only a moment before bounding forward, running circles in the open field. It was the first time she had seen him truly run free from cages and chains. His muscles moved with strength and grace, and for a second she forgot about the scars on his body. He wasn't broken anymore. He was whole. Denise sat on a nearby bench watching them both. Her heart swelled with pride and something deeper relief. For so long she had prayed for a sign that her daughter would find joy again, and now she saw it in the way Lena's face glowed with laughter. When Rocco finally came back panting, he dropped a stick at Lena's feet. "You want me to throw it?" she asked, laughing. He barked once, tail whipping the air. She picked it up and tossed it weakly. Her arms still weren't strong enough for distance, but Rocco didn't care. He raced after it like it was the greatest game in the world, returning it every time. Each throw felt like a victory, small, ordinary, but beautiful. Over the next few weeks, they built a rhythm. Every morning, they walked through the neighborhood. Every afternoon, Rocco waited by the door when the physical therapist arrived. The doctor, a kind man named Dr. Patel, was fascinated by Rocco's attentiveness. "He doesn't leave her side, does he?" he said one day as he adjusted the therapy bands. Denise smiled. "He's her shadow." Rocco sat by Lena's feet, watching every motion, his head tilting when she struggled, his tail wagging when she managed a little more than the day before. During one session, Dr. Patel looked up with cautious excitement. "Lena, let's try something," he said. "Just see if you can feel anything when I press here." He touched her shin gently. For months there had been nothing, just silence, but this time her breath hitched. "Wait," she whispered. "I felt that," Denise gasped. "What I felt," something Lena said again, tears filling her eyes. Rocco's head snapped up, and he let out a short, sharp bark, as if he understood. He moved closer, pressing his body against her knees, his warmth steady and grounding. "Easy, soldier," she said, through a laugh that broke into a sob. "I'm okay." But he didn't move. He stayed there, his weight firm. His gaze locked on her face as if to say, "I've got you." Dr. Patel smiled gently. "He knows." Denise's hand trembled as she covered her mouth. I think he really does." Over the next few sessions, the sensation grew stronger. The doctors couldn't explain it entirely. Nerves don't simply heal overnight, but something had changed. The medical report would later say, unexpected recovery of partial motor response, but Lena and her mother had their own explanation. Rocco had given her something medicine couldn't hope, and sometimes hope was the first step toward healing. One afternoon, while Denise was making dinner, Lena called out from the hallway, "Mama, watch." She braced her hands on the edge of her chair, gritting her teeth. Her arms shook, her face strained, and then just barely, her right leg twitched. Rocco barked once, sharp and proud, his tail sweeping the floor. Denise dropped the spoon she was holding, eyes wide. Baby Lena was laughing and crying at the same time. "He did it with me. Mama, he helped me stand." Denise ran to them, hugging both her daughter and the dog, tears streaming down her face. "Oh Lord, thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." After that day, everything felt different. The house seemed warmer, the air lighter. Even the doctors started calling Rocco a therapy dog, though he had never been trained for it. He had taught himself what Lena needed, when to stay close, when to nudge, when to rest his head on her lap to steady her. The two of them moved like they shared the same heartbeat. They became known around the neighborhood as the pair who walked together. Rocco's loyalty was the kind that could only come from a soul that had suffered and survived. He guarded Lena fiercely, not with fear, but devotion. Once, when a stray dog barked too close, Rocco stepped in front of her, calm but protective, his eyes steady until the threat passed. Then he turned back to her and licked her hand, reassurance in motion. Every day he proved that love wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. One evening, as the sunset turned the sky orange and pink, Lena wheeled herself to the park again. She looked down at Rocco and whispered, "I used to think God forgot about me." The wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of rain. "But then, he sent you." Rocco looked up at her with those same amber eyes that had once been filled with pain, but now held nothing but peace. He pressed his head against her leg, and for the first time, she didn't feel numb. She felt alive. That night, as Denise tucked her in, Rocco jumped onto the bed, curling beside her. Denise adjusted the strap on Lena's new leg braces, her hands trembling slightly as she tightened the buckles. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked softly. Lena smiled, her voice steady. "He's ready, so I have to be." Rocco sat beside her wearing a blue vest with bold white letters that read, "Therapy Dog." His fur gleamed in the sunlight, and the scar across his muzzle was now only a faint reminder of what he had endured. He pressed his head against Lena's arm, tail wagging slowly, grounding her in the present. Around them, the sounds of laughter, barking, and cheerful chatter filled the air. Children ran with rescue dogs, volunteers sold baked goods to raise funds, and cameras flashed as local news crews prepared to film. The event director had asked Lena to speak to tell the story of how a little girl and a dangerous dog saved each other. She was nervous, but as she looked down at Rocco, she found courage waiting in his calm, unwavering gaze. When they rolled up to the small stage, the crowd began to quiet. People recognized her from the video, the little girl in the wheelchair who had hugged the condemned dog. Some whispered her name, others waved signs with photos of Rocco and messages like, "Love heals all." The MC smiled as he handed her the microphone. "Everyone, this is Lena Brooks and her best friend Rocco." Applause thundered through the park. Lena took a breath, feeling her heart pound in her chest. "Hi," she said softly, her voice amplified across the field. "You probably know our story already, but it's not really about what we did. It's about what love can do when no one believes it's enough." The crowd fell silent, drawn into her words. "A year ago, I was told I might never walk again. Rocco was told he wasn't safe, that he'd never belong anywhere. But we were both wronged by the same thing, fear. Fear told me to give up. Fear told him to fight everything that tried to come close. But when we met, we stopped listening to fear and started listening to each other." She paused, glancing down at Rocco, who stared back with loyal eyes that seemed to shimmer in the light. "He didn't heal me with magic. He healed me by staying, by waiting when I couldn't move forward. And maybe that's what love really is, not fixing what's broken, but standing beside it until it isn't so heavy anymore." The audience was still, and even the breeze seemed to pause for her. Denise wiped her eyes from the front row, whispering a prayer under her breath. Lena took another breath, trembling slightly. "Today, I want to try something new," she said, "something we've been working on together." Her mother stepped forward, ready to steady her, but Lena shook her head gently. "No, Mama, he's got me." Denise hesitated but stepped back as Rocco stood beside Lena's wheelchair, muscles taut, alert. She gripped the sides of her chair, heart hammering. "Doctor." Patel, watching from the crowd, mouthed encouragement. Slowly, she pressed her hands on the arms of the chair and shifted her weight forward. Her legs trembled violently, her braces creaking, but Rocco moved in close, pressing his body against her knees. His warmth steadied her, his presence anchoring her against the fear. One deep breath, one push, then another. The world narrowed to the space between her and the ground. And then she was standing. The crowd gasped as the girl who had once been told she'd never stand again rose to her feet with the help of a dog who had once been told he could never be trusted. The MC covered his mouth, eyes wide, while people began to cheer, their voices blending into one roar of disbelief and joy. Denise cried openly, her hands shaking. "Oh, baby," she whispered, "you did it." Lena stood for several seconds, tears streaming down her cheeks, one hand gripping Rocco's collar for balance. "We did it," she whispered, voice breaking. Rocco wagged his tail slowly, his gaze calm, proud, unflinching. Cameras flashed. Applause swelled. The moment was more than symbolic. It was holy, the kind of moment that stays in hearts long after the sound fades. But among the cheering crowd, one man didn't move. He stood frozen, a tall man with gray hair and weary eyes holding his hat in his trembling hands. When Lena sat back in her chair, he stepped forward slowly, almost unsure if he belonged. Chris noticed him first and frowned, recognizing the badge pinned to the man's jacket. "Lena," he said softly, "someone wants to meet you." The man approached, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm Officer Mark Taylor," he said. I used to be Rocco's handler." Lena's eyes widened as the crowd hushed again. The man's voice cracked. "I thought he was gone. I thought he died that night. When I got hurt, they told me he ran off and never came back, but he made it." He knelt down slowly, eyes brimming with tears, and looked at Rocco. The dog tilted his head, sniffing the air. For a moment, the world went still. Then Rocco stepped forward, his ears flattening slightly, as if remembering something half buried in time. The man held out his shaking hand. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "You were always my brave soldier." Rocco sniffed his hand once, then pressed his head into the man's palm. The officer broke down completely, sobbing quietly as he stroked the fur between Rocco's ears. Lena watched her heart aching in a strange, beautiful way. "He found a new mission," she said softly. "He saved me." The man nodded through tears. "Looks like he saved us both." He looked up at her, voice trembling. "Thank you for giving him back his life. He gave it back to me first," Lena said. The crowd clapped again, some crying openly, some smiling through tears. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the light fell across them, all the girl, the dog, the mother, the officer, and it felt like the universe had just stitched something torn back together. Later that evening, after the park emptied and the world quieted again, Lena and Rocco sat under the fading light of the setting sun. Denise was talking with Chris by the car, her laughter light, her voice peaceful. Lena looked down at Rocco, who was lying beside her, his head resting on her foot. "You did good, soldier," she whispered. "You made me stand." He lifted his head slightly and licked her hand. "You know what I think," she said. "I think maybe that's what we're all supposed to do for each other, just help someone else stand." The wind stirred, carrying the faint sound of laughter from across the park. The end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and share it so more people can feel what love and second chances really mean. Tell us in the comments what part moved you the most and where in the world are you watching from your thoughts. Keep stories like this alive.